Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt, and today I show you how to harvest commercial beer yeast. So let's go. So today I think I got a fun little video for you. Recently I've done a couple of videos on yeast, one how to make a yeast starter, and one how to reuse or harvest yeast from a previous batch of beer to use in the next batch of beer. Today we're going to take it up a notch and we're going to harvest yeast from commercial beer, like those you see in your liquor stores, what have you. Now, first question you might get is, why would I want to do that? Well, there's a few reasons for it. First and foremost, it's a great source of free yeast. If you're going to drink whatever your favorite brand is, or try a new beer or whatever, and can harvest that yeast for your brew, makes sense. Just get more kind of bang for your buck. Next, when you get a little further into home brewing, you're going to want to do what's called a clone brew. Make your favorite type of beer. I have here Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Let's say that was my favorite beer, and I wanted to reproduce that. What better way to start on that project than literally harvesting the yeast they're using to make that beer? Again, just a great way to do that. Also, too, you may find that you have access to some different types of yeast strains that you might not find at your local homebrew shop. Now, most homebrew shops are really great on keeping all kinds of yeast, beer, wine, cider, kombucha, what have you. But just sometimes, out in the marketplace, there's some real eclectic brews, and there are breweries that have their own proprietary yeast strains, what have you. And but they make their beer in a certain way that can get harvested. So it's just great access to some unique yeast strains that you may or may not be able to get in your area. So those are just some of the reasons why you would do that. Real quick, what types of beers? Can just any beer do this? Not any beer. Actually, most of the beers that you see in the marketplace, you can't harvest the yeast. Pretty much anything that's been pasteurized, which is most of the commercial beers out there. Your big beers, Bud, Miller, Coors, you're not going to do it. Heineken, Corona, the same thing. You're looking for beers that are unpasteurized and beers that are bottle conditioned. If you don't know what bottle conditioned is, basically they're carbonated in the bottom itself, so it's not forced with CO2. They will, when they fill the bottle, there still may be some active yeast in there, and sometimes they'll add additional fermentables in there to kind of restart fermentation, and that will create CO2, thus carbonating the beer. So that's why that's what that term means, bottle condition. That means that there's active yeast cells that they used in there that you now can harvest from the beer, which is kind of cool. Just to name some of the brands out there, and there are actually some really big brands out there. Of course, we have Sierra Nevada Pale Ale here. Those of you that know the backstory, the gentleman that started Sierra Nevada also started a homebrew shop originally, so he had access to those types of yeast when developing this beer, so it makes a lot of sense. But brands like Fat Tire, Rogue Dead Guy Ale, Bell's Two Hearted Ales, those are all beers that you can harvest the yeast from. Hoegaarden, speaking of kind of a specialty brewer, kind of a different type of beer. Hoegaarden. When you get into clonings, beers, probably one of the first ones people try are Chimay, the red, the blue, what have you. Those beers you can harvest the yeast. Again, if you're going to try that clone out, might as well utilize the same yeast they do. So those are just some of the brands out there, and you can go online. There's people, all kinds of homebrew forums have made complete list of it. But anyway, you're looking for something unpasteurized and something bottled conditioned. Well, with that being said, let's harvest some commercial beer yeast. And to do that, we do it two steps. First, we're going to harvest the yeast out of the beer itself, and then next we'll create a yeast starter. You're going to want to do this 24 to 48 hours before you brew the beer from the yeast you're going to harvest. So with that being said, let's harvest some yeast. All right, real quick, gang, I want you to just kind of take a look at the bottom of that bottle, and you can see there's yeast sitting on the bottom. Now, if you did this with a Corona or a Coors Light or something, you wouldn't see that. So that's where the yeast is at, and that's what we have to get to. I just want you guys to see that real quick. All right, so this part is the most fun part of the deal. I have to drink 2 beers to get to that. I'm doing this for you. You guys remember that. Basically, whenever you buy whatever beer you decide to use, whenever you buy it, leave it in your fridge vertical for a day or two before you do this. That lets everything kind of settle. All that yeast is on the bottom now. And we're just going to pour this real carefully, not to move that yeast. We're going to leave about the last inch or so on the bottom. Alright, pour just a hair more. Alright, so got a little left on the bottom there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these 2 beers for science purposes, and then we'll come back. I'll have them covered. I'll let them sit out at room temperature so they can warm up to room temperature, so when we do the yeast starter, it's at perfect pitching temperature. So let me finish these 2 beers, and we'll come back to do our yeast starter. All right, gang, I got through the tough part. I got both those beers drank. We have a little bit left. Next, we're going to start our yeast starter. If you see my video on yeast starter, I want to tweak that recipe a little bit. I believe in that video is either 20 or 25 grams of dried malt extract for 1 cup of water. I'm just rounding it up to an ounce, just to make this easier, 1 ounce for 1 cup. It's only a few grams difference, but just to keep the math easier. Got some water heating. You're going to want to bring this to a boil just for sanitation purposes. Go ahead and throw in my yeast nutrient, or my malt extract. Speaking of yeast nutrient, though, I was getting a little ahead of myself. Some people will put yeast nutrient in their yeast starter, some won't. This, because we would use it for a pale ale, it's not that big a beer. We're not going to do it, but if you're doing a yeast starter for something like a barley wine, Russian Imperial Stout, a bigger beer, I would use yeast nutrient in that. So let me get this up to a boil, get the malt extract all incorporated in. I'll chill it, and then we'll come back to pitch in the yeast from the beer. All right, gang, so we got our yeast starter cooled down to proper pitching temperature. Next thing we want to do, make sure you got it closed. Give it a good shake. This will help introduce oxygen in the solution, which is good for the yeast up front. If you saw my yeast starter video, you know I talked about when you get more advanced to homebrewing, people have what's called a starter plate that will keep this agitated, always kind of keep the oxygen working. Again, that's for more kind of advanced homebrewing, but for our purposes, just a good shake here introduces enough oxygen, kind of gets it to bubble up. Next, we want to add our 2 beers. You want to give that a good shake too, to kind of work that yeast on the bottom. We don't want to leave, you know, that's what we got this whole thing for, so we don't want to leave any of that on the bottom. Let's give her a good pour. Get that last little, yeah, get the good stuff out. Yeah, I can tell by the bottle we got that yeast out. Let's give the next one a good shake too. Make all that yeast. All right. Get that all nice and out. All right, so from here we're going to let this sit. I'm going to put the lid back on, but I'm not going to tighten it, because what's going to start happening now is the yeast is going to wake up again, start getting real active. They now have new food, so we're going to let this sit for about 24 to 48 hours. You want to keep an eye on it. Maybe even every once in a while give it a little swirl, but keep an eye on that, and we'll come back to see if we're ready to use. All right, gang, just want to show you, it's been about 48 hours. We got a little bit of yeast settling on the bottom. We have some bubbling up top. Wasn't a real strong start to fermentation. Didn't get much bubbles the first 24 hours, but we're starting to bubble up now, and I just wanted to let you kind of see what we have here. All right, gang, real quick to wrap up, we harvested yeast from Sierra Nevada, a commercial beer yeast. I used 2 beers. Maybe we should have used a third. I might would have got a little stronger fermentation going than I did. But at this point now, if I was doing, let's say I was making just a regular pale ale or even a Sierra Nevada clone, I would go ahead and pitch this in, and we would start fermenting that beer. Quick recap, why would we want to do this? A, it's a source of free yeast. Free is always a great price. Two, sometimes you might be able to get a hold of a unique beer style or unique beer strain that you might not could find normally. And lastly, when you get into clone brewing, that is making your favorite beer, whether it be a Sierra Nevada, a Chimay, a Hoegaarden, why not utilize the same yeast that they use at the actual brewery? Just makes a lot of sense. So I just thought you would find this interesting, a nice little tool in your toolbox now as we kind of start brewing a little bit more, kind of expanding our brewing knowledge, and I think something that will definitely come in handy down the line. Maybe someday, further down the line with the 1 gallon brewing thing, I probably will start doing some clone brews. So again, something like a Chimay, why not, utilize their yeast? Well, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for videos, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bombs up.